Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto, and welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. I wanted to share something very special that's going to be taking place next month. I thought it would be neat to invite some experts in private practice development onto the podcast to talk about their experiences in developing practices and helping others develop practices, and just to pick their brains. And for an interesting twist, I thought, I could just interview each expert and just kind of ask them questions, but wouldn't it be interesting to pair up each expert with one of the 4 therapists who I'm interviewing throughout the course of 2017 and essentially have them provide an on-air consultation to each of the therapists? Doesn't that sound cool? And I've gotten 4 experts to agree. You want to know who they are? Here's who I got. I got Maureen Werbach of the Group Practice Exchange, Joe Sanok of Practice of the Practice, Allison Purrier of Abundance Practice Building, and Lynn Grotsky of Private Practice Success. I'm really excited that all 4 of these people have agreed to be part of this experience, these 3-way conversations that we're going to be having. So this is going to be taking place next month, and I can't wait for you guys to hear this, because you're going to learn so much by listening to the experts provide consultation advice to these therapists. So can't wait for that. That's happening next month. Well, for this month and this particular episode, I interviewed Cindy Norton, and I can't wait for you to listen to this episode because she provides so much great content. So without further ado, here's Cindy. Hey, Journey followers, welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. I'm your host, Chris Quarto. Well, today joining me is Cindy Norton, and Cindy, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, and we were just talking before the podcast started today that you're on somewhat of a spring break from your job, but yet you still have things planned for this week, don't you?
Oh, yes, definitely. I've got, I'm meeting several people for coffee this week to talk about my practice. I'm going to some continuing education type things. I'm still attending my supervision, been doing some social media stuff. So it's, I've been keeping busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like you're taking advantage of the time in a way that's going to help you grow and expand your private practice, which I think is wonderful. So.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to it, Cindy. I wanted to address several different things with you this month, and one is about learning about a niche. And I think as you and I are on a lot of the same Facebook groups, the professional groups, and I know that this topic is brought up every now and then about what should you do if you go into private practice? Is it better just to kind of be a generalist, or should you specialize in an area, and can you just start a practice with a specialization? And so I wanted to pick your brains, the 4 therapists, and start off with you just to find out what your thinking is around this whole idea of niching.
I personally think it's a great idea, and it's something that's going to make you stand out from others, and I think it's important in building your practice. But with that being said, I do know a few therapists that I guess there's a difference in being a generalist and then being someone who's also a generalist but has specialized training in a lot of different areas. Because I do see some people that put out their shingle and have everything listed that you can possibly treat.
Yes.
But then I don't really see a whole lot of specialized training in any of those specific areas. And there was a lady that I met at a conference, or actually at a training a few years ago, and I was talking about how important I thought it was to have a specialty. And she had a lot of different things that she was interested in, but she had specialized training in all these different areas.
Wow.
Like, for example, she did work with adults, and she done EMDR and worked with trauma. And then she worked with a lot of children, and she had specialized like parent training and all of these things to back it up by not picking just a single area to work in.
Right.
So I guess that's how I make the distinction, is if people have, maybe a specialized training in certain areas.
Yeah. And, I kind of go back and forth on this because I look at Psychology Today profiles, and I look at, where you can list your areas that you counsel or treat. And when I look at somebody who has like everything, they kind of dump the kitchen sink into their Psychology Today profile saying, I treat this, I treat that. There's like 100 different things that they treat. When I look at that myself, I think to myself, well, are they really competent in doing all these things? Are they really good at doing all these things? And would I really want to go to a person who says that they can do all these things? And it kind of makes me question that. But that's just me. What's your take on that?
I sometimes question it too. I know that there's some really good therapists out there that can work with a lot of different things. But whenever but then you wonder if they're constantly working with all of these different things, how deep and how well trained they are in each one of those methods. Because on my Psychology Today profile, I have 2 specialties listed. Marital and premarital is one, and then relationship issues is another, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And then I just have adults for my age focus. I have one treatment orientation, which is Gottman Method, and then I chose, for the modality, individuals or couples. So it's really basic, simple, and clean. So it targets that, someone who's looking for a relationship therapist.
Right. It makes it really easy, doesn't it, for a potential client to see, oh, okay, so Cindy's specializing, or these are the areas, at least, that she's really focusing on. And so I know that if I go to her, I'm going to get probably pretty good treatment. Now, Cindy, I'm kind of wondering just your own story about how you decided that this was going to be the area that I wanted to focus on, and this was going to be essentially my niche. And how did you go about coming up, deciding that? Because a lot of people kind of wonder, what should I do, and how do I make this decision? What's your story about how you went about making that decision?
It's almost like it was made for me. Like, that sounds strange, but it's just I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So when I first started toying with the idea of doing, having a different career where I help people, it immediately led to being a couples therapist in private practice. I don't know what it is about that. I just think that that's what I'm meant to do. So I feel lucky in the fact that I haven't had to really discover that or worry about it, or like some people do.
Yes.
Because I know there are probably other people out there that knew that they wanted to be a therapist, but they want to help maybe all different kinds of people, or they're not really sure that they want to specialize. So with me, it's just something I kind of knew from the beginning, so it made it a lot easier for me to kind of start out that way, and that's where I've gotten all my training and education. So I was able to go through the graduate program that specialized in marriage and family therapy, and then take the specialized training that I have because I already knew who I wanted to work with. But I understand how it can be really tough for some people that don't know that from the beginning, and it takes a little while to figure it out. Because, for example, like just with me working at the schools, I've found that, I work better with some students than others, just because of whatever their presenting problem is. So, for example, with the kids, I find that I probably work better with kids with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, things like that, versus kids that may have conduct disorder or anger problems. And it may be that I know what it feels like to feel depressed and anxious, but I've never really been like an angry person, so I think that's more in how I relate and how I can better understand the clients. So I think as you practice, for those people that are just starting out and aren't sure what they want to specialize in, or even if they want to specialize, just giving it some time and seeing I think after a year or so, you're going to be able to pick out, just think about what clients you're really excited about seeing on your schedule and what clients maybe you're not so excited about seeing.
Sure.
And usually you're able to pick out a theme, and sometimes that will help you, whether it doesn't have to be a specific age group versus a specific diagnosis. It can be like one or the other. And if you enjoy working with anxiety, you could make a niche around that. Or if you enjoyed working with kids with ODD, you can make a niche around that. So I think it's a lot of, if you're not sure from the beginning, just taking that time, maybe work at an agency for a while, or just, see what clients you mesh with.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, I think back to my own experience where I started off in a community mental health center, more along the lines of a generalist, like we were talking about before. And for me, it was gravitating toward the kids with attention deficit disorder and really having a liking for working not only with those clients, but the parents. And it was really a neat thing for me. And I think that it's almost the same process that you go through, or a lot of kids go through when they go to college, trying to figure out what's my major going to be. And like you said, maybe taking some time to figure that out. And it does take time. I think it's all part of personality development and identity development. Who am I as a person, or who am I as a therapist? What do I want to be? There's a lot of those types of questions, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to think about that and to start to really narrow in on what you want to do and what you want to specialize in.
Yeah, and with the example you gave about going to college, like when I went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to further my education so I could get a good job, but I didn't have a clue. So I started out doing accounting, and then I switched it over to business management. And still, I wasn't completely sure. I was just kind of picking what I felt at the moment. And then, 6 years later, after I graduate, I decide, I want to be a counselor and I want to go back to school. So I didn't know until my late 20s what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I was a little discouraged at first, like, why did I not know this earlier so I could take some psychology classes in my undergrad?
Right.
Because I'd never even had one psychology class when I enrolled in grad school. So that was very intimidating for me because I felt like I would be behind everyone else. But when you look back on it, none of that is wasted time, because in my first class at Capella, I talked to my professor about some of my concerns. I'm like, I think I'm going to be behind everybody.
Right.
And but he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to open up a private practice. And he was like, well, your undergrad in business management is going to put you ahead of other people, that are wanting to open up a business and do their therapy that way. So it was it was a really great reframe.
Yes, you had some strengths that other people didn't have, knowledge and maybe a skill set that others didn't have. And so, that's really interesting, the way to put that as the reframe.
Yeah.
Well,
and even with people that don't know what their niche is, like, none of the time that you spend with clients are going to be wasted time, because that's going to inform what you like working with, what you don't like working with.
That's right.
And even if you're working with a client that has some sort of diagnosis that you really never see yourself working with in the future, it can still pop up, and what you've learned from that will be valuable.
I agree totally. And, part of all that working with all these different clients is that all of these clients have different personalities, which know that for, so learning about your personalities is the next topic I want to segue into here. And, we, as therapists, we bring our own personalities into the counseling office too when we work with clients. But I think that personalities also play an important role as business owners. And I think, kind of looking at yourself, Cindy, if you look at your own personality, is there something about your personality, your traits, that you think have helped you in your role as a business owner?
Oh, definitely. And as everyone knows, if you've listened to previous episodes, I've talked about being Capricorn and the traits that go along with that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of those traits that have helped, being organized, I think, is really important because there's a lot to do opening up a practice. There's so many different facets of it, and if you're not organized, it's really hard to keep up with everything. And I'm somewhat of a researcher, so I really like to research things and make sure that I'm not missing anything. Some of the other traits that I feel that have really helped, just being hardworking and ambitious, goal-oriented, disciplined and responsible, and above all, being patient. I'm a very patient person, and that's something that you've got to have as you build your practice.
Why do you think that patience is important in your role, especially when you're first starting out?
Well, because it can be really easy to get discouraged, and when you it takes a while to build up. So you really have to be patient and trust that the hard work that you're putting in is going to pay off, because it's almost like when you start a practice, you're planting seeds. With each little networking event you go to, or each person you have coffee with, or each time you post on your social media, you're just kind of planting seeds out there. And it takes a while for them to, all these different little actions that you're doing, to result in clients coming through the door. And if you're not patient, it can be really easy to give up like really early before you've even given it a chance.
So what I hear you saying is that it's almost like you have to take a long-term perspective. It's, and I think a lot of people are wanting the quick payoff, but boy, that's not what this is all about, is it?
No, because I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah. Well, looking at yourself, too, I think, one of the things that I teach in a counseling program, graduate program here in Tennessee, and we always talk about the importance of being self-aware, taking a look at yourself, reflecting on yourself, and looking at things that could pose challenges in your work with clients. But kind of looking at yourself, Cindy, I wonder if there are any personality traits that you think could pose challenges for you in your role as a business owner.
Yeah, there's a few, and I'm definitely a perfectionist, and that can be helpful because I like doing things right. I like turning in quality work, and so it can be good. It can be a good quality control type thing.
Sure.
But then it can get a little out of hand when you're just spending hours and hours on something and just not letting it be good enough and putting it out there. So it can kind of delay your action on things, because what's important is just, especially as a business owner, is just like kind of getting things out there. I mean, you want them to look nice, and you don't want to put an image out there to where you're sloppy, but you also want to be able to put content out. Like, for example, a blog post. My first blog post, it was very simple, but it took me hours and even more hours of just thinking about, should I hit the publish button? I'm putting myself out there. So, and just wondering like, oh my gosh, I hope that everything's worded right and I didn't misspell anything. And so sometimes that can get in the way and kind of halt the action that you're taking in your business.
So what do you do?
So
how do you deal with that? I mean, that's your tendency to be a perfectionist. How do you deal with that? Well, first of all, how do you recognize that? And second of all, how do you deal with it?
One way that I recognize it is, this kind of relates to it, but before I start anything new, I feel like I need to be an expert in it, because I'm afraid of making mistakes and I want everything to be right.
All right.
So, for example, if I was to go to a training for something I didn't know anything about, I would study all I could about what that is before I go to the training to learn about that certain thing, because I'm afraid of, looking like I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, sure, right.
So I tend to over-prepare, so I spend a lot of time in the preparation stages without actually taking action.
Okay.
So I know that it kind of delays me in certain things, because I've known that I've wanted to open up a private practice for a long time, and I would keep putting it off. I'm like, oh, well, maybe 6 months from now, I'll be more prepared.
Right.
I just need to take this other training or get certified in this method or do this, and this. So it can kind of bring up all of these different things where I feel like I have to check them off the list before I do something.
It's almost
so that's
like,
kind of how I noticed it.
And just to interrupt, it's almost like if if you do that too much, it can almost paralyze you, can it? And stop you from taking action.
Uh-huh.
So how do you?
If I wouldn't have noticed it, I would still be in the preparing stages for my practice. It wouldn't even be open yet.
There you go. So how do you deal with perfectionism? What do you do?
It's really tough because it's hard because that's really deeply ingrained in who I am. And I just have to trust that a lot of it is just knowing your self-worth and building up your self-confidence, and a lot of self-talk, like, yeah, you do know what you're doing. Like, and you look for the evidence. You look for the evidence, like, you spent however many years in grad school. You've done all these internships. You've worked, you've got so many hours toward this. You've taken all this specialized training. You do know what you're doing. And so it's a lot of like just working on yourself and looking for the evidence that you really are good enough to do this.
Yeah, a lot of that is similar to what we would do with our clients, isn't it? I mean, a very similar type of process. Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
I work with my clients on challenging their negative thoughts all the time, so I have to remind to do that for myself as well. Yes,
practice what you preach, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's go to our next topic, Cindy, which is learning about fee setting and fee negotiation. I think this is a big one in terms of, therapists going into private practice having to think about, well, what should I charge and what's a fair rate, and all these types of questions and unknowns. And I wonder how you went about figuring out what your fees were for your services, and do you have different fees for different services, and how do you go about figuring all that stuff out?
Yeah, I'm so thankful that there were so many of the groups and the practice building coaches and things like that when I first started researching private practice, because it was just so helpful. And I think one of the most helpful ones, I think that I watched one of Kelly and Miranda's videos that they had on their Zenny website on fee setting or something like that, and it really helped me to get an idea about how to do that. And there were so many other blog posts that I read about that and about how counselors struggle with their worth. So I was aware of that before I even started, because if I didn't have any of those resources, I would have probably set my fees at like a minuscule amount that no one could ever survive on, because you don't really know. But after watching their video about how to come about with your fee, I had an idea of the range that I wanted, and I just used their formula and played around with the numbers, and I decided how many weeks that I want to work each year, maybe how many days I want to work each week, how many sessions I want to work during the day. And I would just play around with those numbers until I got something that looked like, oh yeah, with taxes and with all my expenses, I can survive on this and not have to be worried. So that's kind of how I came up with an initial number. But then I was like, oh, I wonder if this is too high for the area. So then I just started researching. I just went on my computer and Googled some therapists in my area and just looked around for people that had their fees posted on their website.
Right.
And then I narrowed it down for therapists who had their private pay rates listed on their website and were maybe in their first 3 years of private practice and were either like provisionally licensed or newly licensed. So that's, people that I could compare myself to in the market. So I looked at all those, wrote down all of their fees, and just kind of see how they compared to mine that I had originally came up with. And I adjusted it maybe $5 or $10 just because of that. I thought that would be a really good fee. And then that's kind of how I came about my rates.
That's wonderful. So really, it was a two-step process. You started off by watching the Zinni Me video, and I'll put that on the show notes so people can access that if they want to. But you said that they had kind of like a formula of sorts that you kind of plugged in some numbers and you figured out, okay, what do I want to make and how does this kind of break down over the course of a year? So that kind of gave you a general idea, but then, for your area and Asheville, you kind of did a local search. It's sort of like how realtors kind of do the comparables. So you kind of looked at what are other therapists charging, and especially therapists who are kind of like me, who may be just kind of going into this for the first time or kind of new in this area. So you can kind of get more specifics that way, and then set a rate that you thought was comparable, but yet somewhat competitive too, I would imagine, and kind of set your rate that way.
Yeah. So I have about 4 different rates listed on my website. So the initial one is for individual sessions. So for individuals, it's all centered around relationships. So it could be someone who is married or in a partnership, but their partner either doesn't want to attend therapy at this time, or they're just not interested in coming, but maybe one person wants to work on their relationship. I mean, I know it's not ideal. They both need to be in there, but that would be providing that support, or helping someone going through a divorce or a breakup, or helping someone prepare for a relationship. Maybe they've had bad relationships in the past and they want their new one to be different, so we can work around that. So that's kind of what those individual sessions look like, and I offer those for 60 minutes, and it's $100.
Okay.
And then moving on to the couples, I just, with the couples, I do the either premarital therapy or the regular couples therapy, and that's all based on the Gottman Method couples therapy that I use.
Okay.
So for those, the intake is 90 minutes, and it's $180. So that includes the $30 for the Gottman relationship checkup. It's a very in-depth 2-hour assessment. I think there's like 480 some questions, and it really informs the therapy. So it can save months of time for me asking, trying to figure out all this information from them. So that's just the initial session. And then after that, we do 90-minute sessions, and it's $150.
Okay.
And then after the 3 intakes, so for the couple sessions, there's the first 3 sessions are like an intake and assessment phase. But then after that, I'm going to allow the couple to choose whether they want to continue with the 90-minute sessions, or if they want to do a 60-minute session.
I see.
So that way we can kind of play around with that a little, what works best for them. And then I offer a 30-minute refresher session. So that can be for anyone that's been in therapy, but they just feel like they need a little check-in, and that would be for 30 minutes, and it would be $50.
Okay.
And so those are kind of my fees that I have, and then I also have one open pack slot available for $50 for people who couldn't afford my regular fee.
Okay, so you have you vary your rates depending on the type of service that you're offering, and I heard you mention the Gottman Method, and kind of going back to the niche when we were talking about specializing. I think this is one of those areas where you had decided to get additional training to kind of bolster your perhaps your expertise in this area of couples counseling. Is that correct, Cindy?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So with the Gottman Method couples therapy, you can, they have 3 levels of training. So I've completed all 3 levels. And then you can move into the certification phase. So, but with the certification, you need to be fully licensed.
I see.
So I'm going to have to wait another year or so before I can enter that certification track. But that is, that's my plan. Once I become fully licensed, I'll be, videotaping, and that can be quite a lengthy process, because you have to get certain interventions on tape, and they have to be reviewed and approved that you've done everything correctly. So I know a few certified Gottman therapists, and I spoke with one, and she said that it was a very, very tough and difficult process to get everything approved. But she said you wouldn't believe how much better of a therapist it makes you for going through that process.
How exciting!
So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, so you basically you've done all the prep work, and so now it's just getting the license and doing the remaining for the certification. Now I want to get back to the fee part, because the whole being licensed and because being licensed would allow you to get on insurance panels if you opted to do that. right now you're not on insurance panels. So I wonder, when clients or prospective clients call you and they get around to asking you, so how much is all this going to cost? Do you ever have anybody that balks and says, that's too much? And what do you do in those situations?
Well, I've had a few people contact me, maybe through email or through my Facebook page. And so, for example, I had one person contact me through my Facebook page asking about scheduling with me and if I accepted insurance. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't accept insurance. But if you will, let me know what insurance you have and maybe any other information of what you're looking for in a couples therapist. I said, I know a lot of couples therapists, and I'll be happy to, match you up someone that has your insurance. And so she responded, she was like, well, I really liked your website. I connected with it. I'll discuss it with my husband and we'll see if we can make it work. So that's, so I haven't heard from her since, but I'm thinking about reaching out to her, and letting her know about my open path slot because it's not filled yet, and just see if that's an option. And then I've had a couple more people contact me through email just this week. One person asked about insurance, and I said no. And then the other person, I think, just wanted to schedule a consultation.
All right.
And then the one phone consultation that I've had, they really weren't concerned about the fee. They were fine paying it. So it just depends. Like, if people have reviewed my website and looked at everything, they know what the fees are before they call in, and they're, not concerned about it. But then otherwise, if people really haven't read through all that, or they just somehow got my name or number, then they'll ask about it. And then I just let them know that I don't accept insurance, and I just try to get more information so I can maybe help find them a good fit for a couples therapist in the area.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things you just said is the importance of your website, because that can really attract clients. I mean, if you have a really nice, and I've looked at yours and it's really good, if you have a nice website like that and others in your community haven't made that investment into a good website, that's one thing that can set you apart from other people and attract clients like you were talking about. So it's nice to hear that. And maybe we can talk more about that on a future episode, because I think that's so critical.
Yeah.
Well,
that would be a good topic.
Let me ask you a little bit about learning from other therapists or other professionals. And over the course of time, I know that you did a lot of preparation to enter private practice, and you did a lot of research. And even now, being in part-time private practice, you're continuing to educate yourself and talk to people, going out to coffee and trainings and all this kind of stuff. And I wonder if there's one or two things that you've learned from other therapists or professionals that's helped you in your journey as a private practitioner.
Oh, wow. Like, it's so hard to narrow down because I visited so many websites and read so many blogs and listened to so many podcasts. I feel like everything that I've learned about being in private practice has come from these other people.
Yes.
So I've just tried to combine their advice with kind of what my education has been in the business management, my undergrad, and just, come up with a good path for me, because you have to adapt everything that you learn to what's going to work for you. So you have to be good at maybe filtering out, because there's so much information and you can't do everything that everyone recommends.
Right.
So you just kind of have to filter out what's going to work for you at this time and adapt it for your practice. Because and I found that a lot of times in the beginning, people are attracted to maybe being taught the nuts and bolts of therapy, like the real specifics, like, oh, you need to do this in order to rank higher on your website, or you need to get this type of insurance, or you need to fill out this form, or you need to register this here. And that's very helpful, but I think it also needs to be combined with the more mindset work, because I think they're both equally important, because as you get further along in getting closer to opening up your practice, all of these fears and worries come up, even though you have all the knowledge that you need to need to in order to move forward, you can really get in your own way if you haven't worked through a whole lot of stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah, and even you were saying about yourself, you have a tendency to kind of be anxious and that sort of thing, and so you prepare and educate yourself. I think that's probably an overlooked point about what you had said about the personal the mindset that you go into this with, is that looking at yourself, kind of going back to what I was talking about in self-reflection and becoming self-aware, but even so, as a prospective private practitioner, looking at yourself and what are your fears, what are your concerns, what are those self-defeating beliefs that may be stopping you from actually taking this plunge, and what is it that you need to do to kind of prepare and deal with those types of things? And so yeah, the nuts and bolts, certainly that's important stuff to know. You can learn that stuff, but boy, this other stuff that's just about you as a person and your personality and all these things that we talked about, boy, that plays such an important role too, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, just to kind of end our episode here, kind of looking at learning. We just talked about learning from therapists and professionals and lots of different ways of doing that, but I think we can learn from our clients too. And sometimes clients will they'll say things, they'll do things that will impact us as private practitioners. I know that's been the case for me, whether it's the way I look at myself as a person, or whether it's how I look at myself as a professional, or how we operate our practices. And talk about how a client may have impacted you, Cindy, since starting your practice.
Well, even just because I haven't seen anyone in my practice yet, but I've had, people contact me, and I've had a phone consultation, and just beginning to learn that way. But I know that as soon as I'm getting clients in the door, that it's really important to listen to them as they talk, even as they call in for a consultation. Just listen to their pain points and the language and how they describe their concerns. And that's a way that can inform you to maybe better update your marketing or your website copy, or how you speak to someone in your Psychology Today profile. And just learning from your clients that way, because they're reaching out to you because they think that you can help them, but then using their language and pain points to even further, specialize your copy in order to where it even speaks to more people. And also, you can look for, as you're meeting with your clients, these people that are kind of in your niche and your ideal clients, you may be able to see things that you can get additional specialized training in. So, for example, if I'm working with a couple and they're, recovering from an affair, I mean, that's something that I want to get within the Gottman training. We cover in the level 3 about how to treat affairs, but they also have a specialized separate training in that goes further in depth on how to treat affairs. And so that's something that I would want to go get more specialized training in, so I could better serve the clients that are coming through the door. So just kind of seeing what they need, and coming from looking at it from a customer service perspective, like how can I best serve these clients?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think the important phrase you used there were identifying the pain points. So what is it that they're contacting you for, and what is it, and how is it that you can be of service to them so they don't experience that pain, or at least don't experience it as intensely as they have been? And the other thing you just mentioned there, and it kind of goes back to the whole niche thing again, is it's not only receiving the training in couples counseling, but even getting more specific is kind of marketing yourself as an expert in who treats couples who have had affairs. And I think that's even a more specific thing, and that's really cool. So I think that people can kind of look at that and look at your example and kind of use that as a model for, I don't want to treat couples, but yet I kind of want to do this or that, and how could I do that, and maybe how could I get more specific within the area that I'm interested in. And so I think those are all good things for prospective private practitioners to be thinking about.
Definitely, because and one thing that some people are scared of getting too narrow, but I don't think I really don't think there's any disadvantages of having a narrow niche,
I
because
agree.
like sometimes even if you only market yourself say that you market yourself as someone who treats anxiety, like specifically panic disorder, and that's where all your marketing goes to.
Right.
Even if that's all that you market to, you're going to get clients from all walks of life that
Oh,
maybe
sure.
aren't specifically struggling with that. Even if you have a very narrow niche, you may only have about 60% of your client load that matches that, because you're going to get people that just know who you are and think you're an awesome person.
That's right.
And it could be maybe someone is suffering from some other type of issue that they need help with that's not related to panic disorder, but they feel just because of who you are as a person that you could help them. So some people worry about it like, oh, well, I'm going to get tired of this niche because that's all that I'm going to see. But you're still going to have a variety of clients contacting you.
I agree. That's great. Well, Cindy, you've offered a lot of great content today for our listeners, and I think that anybody who listens to this should take advantage of some of the things that you've been talking about. But if they have other questions for you or want to learn more about your services, how can they learn about you or contact you?
Yeah, well, my website is avlcouplestherapy.com. And there's lots of information on there. I have a really big resources page where I link to, other relationship podcasts or blogs, and I have books and games and different things like that. And I also have a blog that I need to get back to. I was doing pretty good, posting every week or so, at least once a month, but with the way things have gotten so busy, I haven't posted in a little while, in a few months. So I hope to get back to that, because I think it's really important to have that new and updated content. But there's some fun things on there for people to read about relationships and fun activities for couples.
Good enough. Okay, so we'll make sure and put your website on there, and I think you have a Facebook page as well, and so we'll make sure and put all that contact information on there. And hey, thanks again for joining me today, and we'll look forward to talking to you next month.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thanks. Hey, what'd I tell you? I told you there's going to be a lot of great content on this podcast episode, and Cindy certainly did not disappoint. I think that, as I was listening to this podcast episode again and thinking, you know what? There's a lot to know about starting a private practice, and I'm so fortunate to have the opportunity to interview these therapists on a monthly basis and just kind of talk about, where are you at this month and what's going on, and to address some of these issues, and for you to not feel alone and like you don't have to do this yourself, because a lot of you guys are in the same boat of wanting to start a practice but not quite knowing where to go, how to do it, how to get the information. And so the more I can provide this information to you by interviewing these therapists, and next month by interviewing the experts as well, the more that'll help you and to be successful in your endeavors of starting a practice. And that's what this is all about. Well, if you'd like the show notes for today's podcast episode, please visit my website, chrisquarto.com, ChrisQuarto.com. And I not only have the show notes for today's episode, but actually, if you want to listen to any of the previous episodes or check out the show notes for those episodes, they're all there on that website. So check that out if you'd like to. So I'm really looking forward to our next podcast episode with Amanda Petrick, and see what's going on with her. And other than that, have a great rest of the week.